buenas and half a day to our listeners on Guam and in the CNMI. It's now time for Total Health right here on Joy FM Radio, where your questions get answered by health professionals. If you have any health-related questions, we would love to hear from you. Call your questions and comments in at 472-1111 or text or WhatsApp 686-9999. If you're in the CNMI, please call 323-1113. Welcome everybody to Total Health.
You know, Maverick, hello. Welcome to our audience today. Yes, you're right. We're going to talk about emotional health. And many people feel uncomfortable talking about emotions. And actually, especially men and especially some cultures. I remember, Maverick, once you translated, a talk for me, and it was about emotions, and you stopped in the middle and he said, I actually don't feel very comfortable talking about that. It's not very appropriate in our culture. And that's why we have our radio show today. Because it's easier to talk about emotions on the radio than talking face to face to somebody and trying to explain what you feel about, how you feel and how you would like to be helped or how you would like to help others to satisfy their needs. And that's why we're going to talk today about the lost art of talking. Because we as humans, we mastered so many things. We went to the moon and back, but it just takes us an extra effort to talk and greet our neighbor. But let's face it, there are so many cultures that do not want to talk about emotions, so many men that they don't feel comfortable talking about emotions. But every single crime in this world happens because of emotions. And many times we address the emotions when it's too late. When somebody has already left this world because of unresolved issues. A war starts because of emotions. Every single crime, if we go back, it will come to a hurt, to a pain, to something that wasn't really talked about it. And that's why we would like to push more, towards talking about emotional health. You'll be surprised, Maverick. I keep on getting patients after patients all the time. And they don't need physical needs. They do have emotional needs that they do not know how to satisfy them. They're like, I don't have mental issues or to talk to a psychotherapist. But some emotional issues that they don't know how to verbalize and they don't know where to find help.
Right.
And having said all that, I believe we found some, help or actually expertise on the topic. I know Millie will say no, that's not the case, but Millie Nice is one more time again with us in our radio Total Health, and I'm so excited because Millie is also a professor in communications at the University of Guam, and she has studied the topic more than any one of us. So we are so privileged, Millie, that you're again with us and you're willing to share some of your knowledge and experience through life with us and to help us really work on our emotions so we can become better people, better citizens, better Christians. Welcome, Millie.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was an amazing experience for me being here last time, so I'm really feeling blessed to be here again.
And I know that once the school year starts, we will not see you again. So I really, really wanted to invite you right after the last show. And so we're very happy that you're here. Millie, let's talk about talking. The lost art of talking.
I love your headline and the fact that it has a word art in there. I truly believe it is an art, and it is a little bit lost because maybe we are talking too much and we are maybe listening too little. Because the talk in its own definition should imply the part of listening as well. And maybe we've created all these technical possibilities for people to talk, and so many of them didn't have voices in prior centuries, and there is this need for people to express themselves, and I agree that, but I'm afraid that in doing so, we kind of forgot a little bit the part of where we stop, listen, and even when we are asked a question and we are expected to give a long answer, sometimes we just take those questions for granted, We don't ask ourselves, for example, what is the real question here? When someone asks you, hey, how was your day? What's the question behind the question? Are they really showing love and care for you? Are they worried? Are they trying to control your daily schedule? Are they interested in planning something with you, etc., etc.? Or do they maybe want to tell you about their day? And that's why they are sending the question your way. So there's so many things one can ask himself or herself in that moment. And to do that, we need to stop and pause and not just, catch the line and answer right away.
So you're telling us that talking starts before talking, like perceiving,
Well said.
analyzing, realizing what the situation is and how we can be more helpful when we talk back.
Yeah. And you know what? When we say talk and conversation or communication, usually people just refer to what's spoken, what's said in words, right? For example, if I tell you, Elena, why don't we go out for a dinner, right? I can say that in same words, but in so many different ways. I can say, for example, Elena, why don't we go out for a dinner, right? I can be very angry. And that's what we call paraverbal communication, right? My tone, my voice, my mood that's expressed through that. And then I can say, Elena, why don't we go out for a dinner, right? Then I'm implying I want to go to the dinner with you, not for lunch or brunch or to the beach or for coffee or for Bible study, right? So many things the meaning itself can change. And that meaning sometimes can mean a difference between life and death, how we communicate with someone with the same words, right? We say, I care for you and I love you and I want you to be here. And if we say that with full emotion, with real love and compassion and empathy, a person will feel that connection. If we just mirror some words that we picked up from a movie, a person will feel rejected, even those are the same words. I love you and I want you here, right? But it can sound so empty and uninviting.
Okay, so not only we are analyzing the situation before we are speaking, not only we are listening to the person addressing the question and like reaching to us to establish some, communication, but we are also noticing all those small details around the conversations. Like this is a lot of work.
It is. No one said it's gonna be easy. We said it's art. For me it's more like martial art, And your opponent is yourself, right? How good are you gonna be in that? Depends solely on yourself. You can have the best speaker on the other side. You can have the worst speaker in the world on the other side. It's up to you and what you bring to the table. We need to pay attention to the nonverbal elements. Is person maybe showing they're uncomfortable, that they're cold, that they are feeling overwhelmed or whatever. So many cues one can pick up. But I think, in the Bible, when they asked Jesus, okay, there's so many commandments, but which one is the most important, right? And he says it's love, right? In so many other forms, but it's love. And I'm thinking the same about communication, right? We have so many rules. We have, as you said, so many things we have to think about, to take into consideration when we're communicating. What's the most important thing, right? Well, for me, the most important thing basically comes to love. But if I'm going to put it in practical terms, is what is it that the other side really needs? And what can I do to help that side, that person, satisfy that need? Because if I'm only taking care of myself, what I need to accomplish what's my communication goal, right? I want to convince you in this and this. I want to convince you that we should go to the vacation here, and I want to convince you that my faith is the right faith or whatever, right? Then the other person is going to feel like we're not accepting them for who they are, right? That we're fighting them, that we want to accomplish only our goals, and that we're not really providing a good role model, right? But if we ask, hey, what do you need? What can I do to help you out? They're going to see someone who is a truly follower of Jesus, right? And that's our way to approach them.
Well, as you're starting this way, let's really dive into the topic, because if we are assessing the needs of everybody, if we are discussing so many things with so many people over, during the day, how can we make sure we understand their needs? I don't know about you. Sometimes have a misinterpretation of what the other needs are, based on my way of perceiving things. I really like the fact that the word talk comes from tell, like saying a story. And so it is important to understand, and when we go into a conversation, to see what's the story behind it, from how the way you're putting it, like what's the story behind it and how I can help that person. But we're living in a world that when you help others you can get hurt, and many people try not to get into that assessment of the needs to help others because they perceive that they might be hurt in a long term. So we have become a society of small talks, very superficially, just scratching the surface and being afraid of what's underneath. Am I heading in the right direction?
Yes, you are. We may not have enough time before the first break to talk about vulnerability and courage, but we'll definitely touch on that topic. And I think this is where you're taking us. I just want to step back for a moment and go to what you said about telling a story. I think the storytelling format is definitely the right one to use. If we think about little children, like when they're kids, 2, 3, 5, 6 years old, we don't read encyclopedias to them. We read them stories, bedtime stories, right?
Right.
And our mind is wired that way. We catch up things, we absorb things when they are presented in the form of a story. And when we look at the Bible, Jesus was the best storyteller, right?
Yes.
He was
indeed.
using that format to convey the message, and he was adjusting it well to the audience. So I think that a storytelling format is really good one to assess people's needs. And sometimes you don't have to ask deep questions. Sometimes you can just say, hey, tell me more about that. And you let the other side decide what's the right amount that they are ready to share, how much their inner being needs to reveal at that moment, not to feel too exposed or too vulnerable, but to feel comfortable and to try to establish a trust between the two people. A second question that's good to ask is, wow, that sounds really interesting. Can you help me understand that more deeply? And you let the other person tell that in her or his own words.
Well, yes, it's true. What an art it is. And, some of us are not very crafted in arts. Now, perceiving talk as an art, it just brings it to a different level. But as we have read in the chapter of 13 Weeks to Love, one of the chapters is talking about the lost art of talking. And in it talks about the 4 layers of human communication. And we will delve into the topic right after the break. Right, Maverick?
Yes, ma'am. All right, we're now diving into our first break of Total Health. We will be right back with our topic, Lost Art of Talking and Emotional Health.
C'est Joe Osmossi, and thanks for listening.
For the last 6 days, thousands of Israelites have marched around the fortified city of Jericho.
Another 30-second Bible story from Joy FM.
It's day 7 in a campaign we're calling March to Victory, and the Israelites are just ending their 7th trip around Jericho. Wait, something is happening. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe it. The walls of Jericho are falling.
An unusual strategy, armed with nothing more than sandals, horns, and a trust in God. The capture of Jericho can be found in Joshua 6, proving once more that when God says it, you can believe it.
C'est Joe Osmossi, and thanks for listening to Total Health on Joy FM. We want to hear from you. Call in with your health-related questions at 472-1111 in Guam or in the CNMI. The number to call is 323-1113. Text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, back to the show.
Okay, so I did bring Millie today with the purpose of really going deep, because I would really like to get to the core of emotional communication and how we can be very effective and compassionate listeners, right? And at the same time to have this empathetic outlook towards the conversation and experience some gracious assertiveness. We'll talk more about that, but before that, we were about to talk about the layers of communication. And I really enjoy the fact that the book calls it that life is onion. So life has different layers. And we can feel those layers when we talk to different type of people. Let's say when we talk with strangers, we have more superficial talk. And then with acquaintances, we go deeper. Then with friends, we go even deeper. And with a family and yourself interpersonally, you go to the deepest level. And when we talk about emotion, we certainly work towards those feelings that we experience on a relationship level, on a different relationship levels. So the outer layer of the onion, let's say, is when you meet a stranger. And this is, all related with the events, conditions, situations that you share with those people, those strangers. You can talk about the weather. I don't know about you, Millie. I can't talk about the weather much. I'll just say a few words, and I'm not very good in like a small talk. And then we'll talk about the local or the national elections, or maybe the current situation, maybe about the hurricane, the typhoon, Mawar, COVID. Or if you're in a crowd, you can talk about the delayed flight, some recent world events, disasters, the war in Ukraine, of course, and the famine. Then we will go deeper in the middle layer. This is where our mind comes stronger, our thoughts, our opinion, our observations, and we do that well with acquaintances. And we can discuss moral issues, social trends, and what are our reflections on different things. Going deeper, we go to the inner layers of the onion, to our heart, our personal feelings and experiences. We can talk about the children in our life, the children in other people's lives. We can talk about pets. We can talk about hobbies, things that we love, things that we cherish. And then we go into our family circle, or like deeper into the innermost layer, when it is actually our relationship with us and our loved ones, and how we experience that, what hopes we have, what dreams we have. Many times this conversation takes place only in our mind. We just don't share it. Or we can, cherish or keep our hurts there, our disappointments, or have a remorse about something we have done or we haven't done in a relationship. And going through all those layers, is it important that we go straight to the deepest levels when we can really talk about emotions? Or do we have to do that gradually until we just feel comfortable talking about emotions? I'm a person, I feel comfortable talking about emotions. I've went through a lot of personal trouble. And the faster I get to the inner circle with somebody, the easier it is for me to help them and they to help me. But it's not very well perceived in general. What would you say? How do we go about it? Do we really talk about problems and hopes and dreams that we have in our souls? Do we keep it only for certain people, our families? Or do we just live a transparent life that will make us all being very open to each other and vulnerable at the same time?
Wow, I don't know which question to answer first, but I'll try to prioritize them. I love the symbolism of the onion, and I want to share a story. For example, when I cut the onion, I start crying right away. I have very sensitive eyes, but I don't give up. Like I don't make breaks. I don't go out to have some fresh air and to relieve my eyes. But for example, my sister-in-law, when she was little, and her mom would ask her to come into the kitchen and help her out to cut the onion, she would come in with a snorkeling mask.
Oh, wow.
On her face to protect her eyes.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So what I'm trying to say is that, there's so many different strategies on how to peel and cut the onion. And there's so many different strategies of how people deal with their emotions. So what's the best way to process it, to express it? I don't think there is a universal recipe. I think if there is like one fits all rule, it would be truthful to yourself while being respectful to others. And when I say respectful to others, meaning respectful to their identities, to their cultures, to their faith, and so on. So no, I wouldn't recommend you to change how you feel and how you go about your own emotions, because I don't think that would be healthy. But if it's insulting for someone, I would then say, let's reconsider how you can still be truthful to yourself, but be respectful to others. Do we just dive in, or do we go gradually? It depends on how we were raised, how our experience shaped us, and so on. But I want to say that journey is for sure not easy. But in some way, it is good it's not easy. I think we said last time, when things are easy in life, rewards are small. When things are hard, rewards are big and significant. So yeah, when you deal with hard emotions, when you process hard communication, when you face things that are challenging, you get that satisfaction of, wow, I did this. I had courage to do this. Even if it's not the desired outcome, you learn from it and you grow and you continue working on it. That brings us to your and my probably favorite topic, which is vulnerability and courage. And over there, I have a great movie to recommend. It's a movie called To Courage by Brené Brown. Brené Brown is someone who is a researcher of shame, vulnerability, and courage for a couple of decades. She's an amazing scientist. And she actually came up with a formula that companies, for example, can use to measure someone's courage. Like they can predict how courageous someone is going to be when situation comes up. And the formula is the following: you're going to be as brave as much you're ready to be vulnerable. And it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You're thinking, oh, being vulnerable, that's weak. That's for sure not strong and courageous. But actually, vulnerability means that you're ready to expose yourself and go into something you believe in, even though you're not sure about the outcome, right? Saying someone, I love you first. Starting to date after a very, very hurtful breakup. Trying for a second child after a miscarriage. Those are things that are very, very vulnerable. And to go through them, a person needs to be very courageous. So when companies are looking to hire top managers, they don't want them to be heartless. They want them to be vulnerable, to be ready to be vulnerable, because that means they will be courageous when needed.
Oh, wow. So I never thought that courageousness will be something that would really qualify you for a job.
Yeah.
And actually being courageous and being vulnerable actually means being emotional and talking about that, recognizing the emotions in others. You're right. Maybe that will be one day really the most important asset that one person can have when they are interviewed for a job.
Yeah, and you know what? Sometimes those emotions are hard, and we have to admit that. We cannot lie to people and say, yeah, just feel it. Just feel that disappointment. Just feel that sadness. Just dive into the embarrassment. Just embrace it. It would be a crazy thing to say. But telling them, try it out, feel it. It's going to make you human. It's who you are with all of your emotions. If you try to dissociate, if you try to reject it, it's just going to come after you and hunt you. And, whatever you run away from, it comes after you. I've experienced that my whole life. Whatever I said, I will never do that. I just ended up doing exactly that thing a few years later. So, yeah, I think that we should start kind of growing that culture, each of us, in which vulnerability is seen as a desired behavior. Because we cannot go through life without feeling things.
No, and we are who we are because of our emotions, and all our life we're trying to suppress them. It's like at the end of our life, we were just not truthful to ourselves. And if you're not truthful to yourself, to whom are you truthful to?
Exactly.
I read this quote, Millie, and I'm really, really impressed that every time you feel a pain, it means you're alive.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can feel the pain of somebody else, then you're a human being.
Wow.
If I can feel, your pain, and we do have built a culture that your pain is your pain, my pain is my pain. I already have too much of my pain to share it with you, and I don't want to bother you with my pain. But you're right, if we build a culture that we carry each other's burdens, as the Bible says, the world will be different. But then we say, okay, how can I be vulnerable and open my soul? Then I open myself to more hurt. And that's true. When you expose yourself, you can receive avoidance, you can receive rejection, you can receive, even more criticism for like being willing to talk about it. But then you get into this gracious assertiveness that I was talking about. Yes, maybe I'll be hurt. Yes, maybe I'll be misunderstood, but maybe I'll get help that will outweigh the risks of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are going to be times when you're going to be hurt and disappointed and let down by people when you expose yourself out there. But then there are going to be so many times when you're going to get just what you need. You're going to get that love. You're going to get that support. And every time when you get the disappointment instead of love, I want us to remember, I believe it's 1 Corinthians chapter 18. God says, I will not let you down. I'll be there always with you. And whenever there is hardship in your life, I will leave a door for you. I will create a door for you so you can face that challenge. And whenever in my life I receive that rejection or I receive something different than what I've imagined I need to get, there are two things I get from that verse. The first one is, however big the challenge, that's how big God's trust in me is, because he said he's going to give me only the challenge that I'm able to go through.
Wow.
So if the challenge is big, that means he has a huge trust in me and he sees my potential, right?
Never put it this way together.
And then the second thing is, wow, it's different than what I've expected. Well, of course, maybe that's not what's the best for me. God has some better plan for me. So I maybe needed this embarrassment or disappointment or rejection because there is something so much better that he has, and I am unable to see it from my tiny little perspective.
And actually, as you're saying that, and I'm reflecting on the words that the best motivator in life in general is rejection. I'm not promoting rejection by all means, but there has nothing been more motivating to me. Maybe I'm doing it for the wrong cause, but when I have been rejected in something, I work so much harder on that, and of course, then the benefits are even greater.
There is a saying that there are no mistakes in your life. You either succeed or you learn, right?
And I've done a lot of them.
Yeah. And I did a lot of learning. And sometimes, the scholarship and the tuition, the tuition is very expensive. You pay a lot with your emotions, you find yourself on your knees. It hurts physically. It hurts emotionally. It hurts however you want. Your ego is shattered. And I pick up myself and I say, okay, this was a tuition for this lesson learned. And that makes that, let's say, mistake worth living through. If I don't get anything from it, if I didn't learn, then tuition was wasted.
You're very right, Millie. And many times when I have really been vulnerable, I'm a person, I'm open, I'm vulnerable, and people kind of react in a negative way. I learned how not to do it when somebody else comes to me with the same problem, and how not to tell them those things that hurt me in addition to it. So you become actually a more skillful talker by like really risking and exposing yourself, and by facing the positive and the negatives from it, you are able actually to help further.
Yeah, let's conclude this chapter then with Viva la vulnerability.
All right, we are now diving into our second break for Total Health, and I think we've learned a few things about being truthful to ourselves, because that's who we are, and also being courageous. So we'll be right back after this short break.
You could either be encouraged, you could be touched, you could be convicted. It's a powerful thing.
The impact of Joy FM.
Whether we are having the best day of our lives or it's not so great, but to have something to be able to, kind of tune your life out for a second and listen in, it's very important. And I think that's why God created it.
Reaching families and changing lives through your support of Joy FM. Family-friendly radio.
Welcome back. You're listening to Total Health on Joy FM. Call in with your health-related questions to 472-1111 in Guam. If you live in the CNMI, we want to hear from you too. Call 323-1113. or text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. And now, here's more Total Health.
All right, we are digging even deeper. Millie, thank you so much for really helping me being more talkative today, the art of talking and really opening up my soul to you. And I believe that all of us, we have to come into a terms that we are comfortable in our workroom, like a workshop within our own soul, in which we sit down and we just talk to ourselves. No accusing, no labeling, no criticism, no shaming, no belittling, no dismissing, no invalidating stuff, no stonewalling stuff, misinterpreting ourselves, just being truthful to ourselves. And many problems are actually happening when the workrooms of two different individuals are just not tuned with each other. And I'm sure you also, as someone studying psychology, yes, you have experienced meeting different people that just try to understand each other, but they have different viewpoints. The husband says something, the wife says something else. It's just very difficult to tune those workrooms in ourselves that are coming with our, experiences, our emotions. Can you kind of help us how we can really build our relationships in a way that they can become meaningful because of our vulnerability?
Okay, if I had time to give just one answer to this, and there are so many answers one can give, my one and only answer would be reflective listening and mirroring. I remember that when I came in, you said, people from the radio already have some questions, like what do we do if someone is watching on their phone and not listening to us, right? So how about if we just acknowledge that and we don't try to change it, right? Because if we're trying to change other person, we're for sure going to fail. I love this saying which says, when an egg is broken from the outside, a life is lost. When an egg is broken from the inside, a life is born.
Wow.
Right? So if we're trying to push something from the outside, we're going to break that person or our relationship, right? But if we help them grow from the inside, so they're on their own will breaking that husk, we're going to probably get somewhere. So let's say that a husband and wife sit down and one of them wants to talk, the other one is on the phone, right? So if we just say, hey, you're really into your phone, right? And we don't make that as a judgment statement. We just make that as an observation, right? What's going to happen is probably the other person is going to say, yeah, you know what, look, here's something interesting I've seen, and they're going to share it with you, and then you become part of that world. You become part of the conversation. The door is open. If you come in and you say, you don't pay any attention to me, I'm sick of this and tired, I'm not going to sit up with this anymore, and so on, that's not going to lead anywhere, right? But if we validate that, hey, you seem like it feels good to be on the phone these days. How are you feeling when you are scrolling, right? That's inviting. That's an opening question without judgment. And it helps you connect with that person. And you're going to find out that they're maybe overwhelmed at work, and that's their way to zone out, right? But if you put sentences like, I feel unloved, I feel that you don't appreciate everything I do at home, and so on, that's not a good start of the talk.
Well, yeah, you're very right. Relationships are very vulnerable too, and they can go both directions. And I'm sure you have experienced both. I have experienced both ways, and it depends on my mood for the day. Sometimes things can go really sour. Sometimes I might be in a good mood of talking right, I will get there. What would you say? So-called like unconditional talking, like unconditional love towards the person, not judging.
Let's dispel it,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
There is no such thing as perfect communication. There is no such thing as perfect relationship or marriage, right? We are all striving to be our best. But we are for sure going to have so many bad days, right? When we're not proud of how we said something, of how we communicated. But it's important that we come back to that moment, we bring awareness to that and say, you know what, that really wasn't my most brilliant moment. And we go back and say, you know what, I'm really sorry for what happened over there. And I know you're still here for me, and I appreciate that.
Yes, I was like very impressed. In the book, was talking about how we can address relationships, and as I was reading the questions, I don't think anybody does that. But you tell me if that's really something we should consider or it's something outdated. Like if a relationship doesn't go very well, would you go and say to the person, "Hey, how do you think? What do you think about our relationship? How do you think it's going?" Or what has it been like for you to be in a relationship with me?
Mm-hmm.
Then another question, would you like to hear how it has been for me to be in a relationship with you?
Mm-hmm.
Or what can we do to improve our relationship? Or what are some good things about our relationship? Do you think that's like weird talking about
Absolutely
relationship
not.
with the person you're in a relationship?
I think that's amazing. I think that's that's the lost art of talking, right? When you come into your partner and you say, "Hey, I'm wondering how was it for you in the last couple of months to be my partner? And I'm also wondering, what can I do to be a better partner?" An amazing psychotherapist that I know actually does that in her workshops. She's training people to go back to her or his family members and ask them every 6 months or a year, what can I do to be a better person in this relationship? And it's inviting because you can learn a lot. For example, when you ask that your partner, the partner might say something like, "Oh, it's been wonderful. I so much appreciate that you give me time for myself when I can have a quiet time to gather my thoughts, to re-examine my day and plan for the future." And maybe for yourself, until that moment, you were thinking, "Oh, this person is kind of avoiding me at some moments and wondering, why is this happening? I'm not sure if this person is committed," and so on. So you can learn so much by asking that question. And then also, sharing how was it for you? What are the things you enjoy? What are the things you still look to explore or to improve or to change? And again, without judgment. Just putting it out there, saying, for example, "I felt like this and this in this situation," but not blaming the other person for how you felt. And then there was another thing that I wanted to say, that when we focus in a relationship on something that's, for example, not ideal, to something that bothers us, that's going to grow. Whatever we focus on keeps growing in our life. There is a book I want to recommend. The author is Pam Grout, and the book is called E Square. It's a reference to the Einstein,
the formula.
And she's giving these crazy experiments, like pop-up experiments, not a real scientific experiments, but she's trying to teach us on a daily level that whatever we put focus on is going to grow. And she tells you, for example, here's 8 crazy things, like a senior citizen with a crazy hat, your favorite song from high school, your childhood favorite toy, numbers 22274 or something like that, and she gives you this list and she says you have 72 hours to find all of them without, Googling them. They're going to show up around you if you just keep looking for them.
Oh, wow.
And when I did that experiment, it was, a middle of January in Europe. And one of the things on the list was a butterfly, and I was wondering where I'm going to find a butterfly. Where am I? Oh, one of the things was a beach ball. I was thinking where I'm going to see that. In January, it's freezing. We are, it's like minus something. And I was actually looking for a job ad, and something popped up on my phone, and it was an ad. And on the picture, it was a little girl, and there was a butterfly that just landed on her nose. Right? But I would never notice that butterfly. I would just close the ad, right? If I didn't have an assignment to do, and that is to find a butterfly among other things within 72 hours. And if we commit ourselves to the same thing in our relationships, imagine how wonderful it's going to be if we say, you know what, for the next 3 days, I'm just going to see good things about my partner. I'm going to stay committed to seeing how amazing father my husband is. I'm going to stay committed to seeing how hardworking, how loving, how caring he is. That doesn't mean we deny the other part when they don't show up their brightest side, right? But we observe what happens when for 3 days or 7 days or a month, we stay focused on that. that's going to continue growing, and the other things are going to start slowly decreasing.
Yeah, the Bible says whatever you contemplate, this is what you become.
Absolutely.
So if you contemplate into those things, bringing up the relationship and, talking about it openly, it will be so beautiful. Millie, I have to address it because we're talking about emotions. What about if we don't have the same reciprocal answer on the other side?
Wow, yeah, that is a hard one. I want to say that can happen for several reasons. The first one and the hardest one is we don't share the same values. We don't share the same core beliefs. I've seen so many, for example, young ladies who go into bars and disco clubs to find a guy. They finally find someone they, let's say, liked or something, and they start dating them or they even marry them, and then they start complaining, he drinks all the time. He goes out with his friends all the time. And I'm thinking, wow, did you guys meet in a library or in a sport club or in a disco club? What were your expectations? Mm-hmm. And for me, that's a pretty much very, very strong sign that they don't have probably core values, that their interests are not so much aligned. And it's very hard to maintain a relationship when your core values, core beliefs are not synchronized. That doesn't mean the both of you have to love volleyball, right? But you have to believe that a good sport activity is a solid thing for someone's well-being, right? If you're total materialist and the other person has a spiritual life, that's going to be a problem, right? Those are core beliefs that are not aligned. So many problems start from there. And I'm for sure not advocating for arranged marriages, but I was thinking, why are so many marriages from the old times? Why people were able to find a common ground? And I believe that was because parents were looking for someone with similar beliefs, with similar core values. They were looking to connect their child with the family that they found that they can communicate with. I'm absolutely not advocating for arranged marriages. They have so many, downsides. The other situation that I see why people in a relationship might have different views is, they had different experiences. And that brings me back to the idea, I'm going to try and convince you that my view is truthful one, right? I always go back to the number 6 or number 9, right? If we write down the number 6 and we stand on one side of that, it's going to look like number 9. On the other side, it's going to look like number 6. So when you find yourself in that situation, my best advice is try going to the other side. Stand in the shoes of the other person for a day. Try to see their perspective. You don't have to agree with them. It's just going to help you understand where they're coming from. And communication is going to be easier.
And this is where maturity comes from, when you start seeing both ways.
Yeah.
Not just like one-sided, black and white thinking, but actually you can see that life has more to add to it. There are many colors, and there is so many colors also in the art of talking.
That's right.
And we are now diving into our final break for Total Health. Do not go away. We will be right back after this final break.
There is bound to come some trouble, but God is good when life is hard. That's easy to say, and it's absolutely true, but sometimes life makes it hard to believe truth. Face it, you live in the middle of mess. Sometimes your smile is a mask for pain. Sarcasm disguises struggle, and the anger you feel needs something different than the fuel of everyday frustration. You've been there. You've lived it. You recognize a bad day when you see it. It's never welcome, but trouble is a regular guest. The good news is that bad days are not forever. They don't even have to change the way you do life today. God wants you to find peace, experience joy, and live in the company of hope. Bad days will come. Trouble shows up for all of us. And then there's God. He never leaves you. He doesn't abandon. And He won't pretend He doesn't know you. See? Your day is getting better already. Joy FM.
And we're back with more Total Health. Give us a call with your medical questions. Number to call in Guam is 472-1111. If you're in the CNMI, the number to call is 323-1113. Or you can text or WhatsApp us at 686-9999. Now back to the program.
We're in our last session. I don't want to finish that session because I'm learning so much for myself. And, I'm actually learning how to put aside some of my pride and being a better listener, a better talker, if I can put it that way, and actually express my emotions when as needed. If I feel frustrated, I better speak about it, not letting it, to bottle up in me and then I'll explode when the least I expected. Or if I feel hurt, somehow to be able to communicate that. If I can't communicate to people, let's communicate it to God. God is always having an opening and listening ear to hear my pleas and my needs. If I'm confused, I'm confused. Admit it to yourself. See what could have happened, why it's happening like that, and what is God trying to teach me with that lesson. If I feel afraid, I feel afraid. I need to acknowledge my fear. I need to acknowledge where my anxiousness comes from and, surrender, just put it into the feet of Jesus and just look for an answer that he's going to whisper to me. Millie, I know you would agree. There's so many great Bible verses that can help us to become better talkers. And actually, God had found the Bible to be the way that he talks to us. He didn't use music. He didn't use art like drawing or nature to communicate directly to us. Of course, those are part of the art of talking, but he also uses directly words. So this is a way how he wants us to communicate using the words. Jesus is called the Word. He is very proud to be associated with something so significant, the way of communicating to us. And by all means, he didn't create this world and just left us over there not knowing what's happening. He left it. He's giving us all the time insight after insight. And there are so many Bible verses that I believe we can relate to them, talking about the art of talking.
Yes.
Maybe I will start with one. Maybe you can give another one, and we can go forward.
Sure.
One verse that's really nice in Psalm 19:14 goes this way: "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer." And the mouth of the righteous speaks wisdom, and his tongue talks of justice. The law of his God is in his heart. None of his steps shall slide. Look how amazing it is.
Yeah.
And it does start with the tongue, with the mouth. My mouth in Psalm 49:3 says, "My mouth shall speak wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall give understanding." I don't know about you, but many times I lack understanding. And if I haven't mastered the talk of talking, it is because I'm lacking understanding. I'm lacking, a way of perceiving things. And I'm so centered into myself and my emotion that I can't see outside and grasp the emotions and the battles that other people have.
I have a great personal example about that. I have a PhD in impatience. Like
patience or impatience.
Impatience. That's probably my biggest sin. However, I've been dealing with this person who is like, how do I put it? Well, a big racist, someone who is really not accepting of others, with very, very rigid attitudes and opinions, and very exclusive of others, and so on. And, I was trying to approach this person and kind of broaden her views and, in my opinion, open her eyes that racism is wrong and things like that, But what I caught myself in one moment when I was talking to God, and I was kind of, telling him about this terrible person that I've been dealing with, and I could hear back, what's the difference between the two of you? And that insight that he gave me in that moment was that I find that person impatient. I find that person rigid. I find that person unaccepting people who have different faith, different skin color, different beliefs. But what am I doing? Am I accepting this person? Or am I in the same way acting as she is? I am rejecting her, right? So sometimes those little trials comes as lessons for us to understand that, we cannot understand others because sometimes we don't fully understand ourselves.
Wow. So actually, the key of growing into relationship is the key of growing into yourself and your own vulnerability.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't have sometimes all the skills and all the knowledge to meet all our inner world or our whole person, but there is someone who knows each and every part of us. So we can always reach to that being, to God, and ask him, hey, what can I do to be a better person? Help me out here, please. And then listen, meaning being quiet, just sitting in the presence of God and letting him guide us.
Millie, this week I learned some interesting fact that we are not born with fears. We are actually born only with two fears that are innate. Everything else is acquired. One of them is we are afraid of heights.
Mm-hmm.
We're just born with that.
And that's actually protective fear.
It's a protective, but we are born with that, so we don't want to fall down.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. And the other one is when somebody's screaming or there is a loud music, you try to close your ears because we don't know why we're doing it, but it's like instinctively.
Mm-hmm.
And we are afraid of like high noises. Every other fear, every other anxiety, everything else that we are like afraid or we put our brakes on, it's acquired. You have learned how to do that and how to protect that. And so I think half of our life is accepting this new knowledge that God is giving us and listening to him, his word, and other people's needs. And half of it, it's unlearning all those fears and all those things that we have accumulated through time that are actually stopping us from growing.
Yeah, because majority of those fears are actually our fears for our ego. What's going to happen if I don't pass this exam? Does that mean I'm not worthy as a person? Does that mean I'm unsuccessful? And so on. But I always tell my students before they take a test, this test you're going to take is only going to measure one thing and one thing only. That's how well you presented yourself in one small area of your life in one single moment on a standardized test.
Well,
and
I wish
it has
you were my
nothing
teacher.
to do with your worthiness in your life. You are worthy as you are, no matter how you score. And, in materialistic world, they want to trick us. They want to tell us you are only as worthy as your grades are. You're only as worthy as your bank account and so on. Right? As only worthy as your house is big. But that's not true.
But you have a lot of degrees. I have behind several of them. Everything that we have accumulated, it doesn't bring the whole happiness.
No.
And we'll say maybe a happiness is in being so smart, or maybe the happiness is having the best family possible, or maybe the happiness, and you have that, and you realize that that's not it. There is like a deep need deep inside of you that God has put there for something greater than you have ever imagined, and he trusts us more than what we can really do. And that could be possible only when we all grow up and upward and, forward, and we lift each other to greater dimensions we've never ever thought. Because let's face it, I can't get to some great level just by myself.
Absolutely.
In a place that I'll be completely satisfied. I'm not saying like in one area or two, as you said, one test for a single moment, like in an area that I'll be completely satisfied with the life I have, to the fullness of the life I have, the greatest experiences that I have. That is possible only when we bring other people into our life, that they open our lives' eyes to other realities, and when we explore the deepest areas that God wants for us to see. Do I make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
If
I can just add one thing, I'm looking at the clock, and there was one thing I wrote down that I absolutely should not miss when we are talking about communication and talking. and achieving what really matters in life. Every so often, I get clients who are trapped in this feeling of guilt. And that feeling of guilt was, of course, put on them in the process of communication, right? People blame them for something. And I'm all for understanding who did what and what were the consequences of certain action, but I'm not for guilt. I actually, when I work with people, I tell them this is a room in which the word guilt is forbidden. And here's why. I prefer the word responsibility. Because if you're guilty of something, there is a victim, there is a perpetrator, right? And it keeps you in this vicious negative downward spiral. And you cannot get out of it, especially not without a higher help, right? But if you're responsible for something, and even if you made a mistake, even if you did something wrong, something terribly wrong, you're still responsible for that, meaning you have ownership for what you said or what you did or how you behaved, and you still have the power to repent and to change things because you're still responsible. You didn't stop being responsible when you did that or when you said that. You still have that power, that capacity, and you can continue making it right. So in communication, I think it's really important when we hear people saying, yeah, she's guilty of that, or yeah, I'm guilty for not being a better parent. And I just want to remind you, you are responsible for being as good parent as you want to be. You're responsible for communicating with your wife or your husband as good as you want to. And you still have that power in this very moment. So feel free to use it.
Wow, that's incredible. I think you're very right. Only when we were born, the only way of communicating with others was skin to skin. But after that, as we started speaking, the way of communicating to others is tongue, tongue to tongue, and then heart to heart.
Mm-hmm.
And God wants us to communicate in that way. God wants us to communicate in a way that it is not offensive to others, because we also have been guilty of things. I don't know a person that hasn't been guilty of anything. I don't know a person that hasn't been ashamed in this life. I don't know a person that hasn't, knows very well how to communicate. But there are so many colors and so many patterns in this art of talking. And I'm very grateful, Millie, to you that you were willing to talk about that. And by becoming better talkers, we become better people.
Yeah, and maybe we can conclude today with an invitation for people to think, what is a thing that you can communicate to your people around you that's going to make this world a better place for today?
Yes, we can all put it as a task to ourselves. Yeah. And thank God He can help us in that.
That is for sure.
The lost art of talking.
Be sure to check with your doctors before making any sudden life changes discussed today. Total Health is brought to you in partnership with Guam Seventh-day Adventist Clinic, where health is their mission. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you and Sijuas Maasi for listening to Total Health right here on Joy FM.